SelfOS. Awareness is power.
So I want to tell you something about this show, and I'm going to be honest about it in a way I haven't been yet, because I think it's relevant to what we're talking about today. And because, well, that's kind of the whole point of this episode. This show started as something I made for myself. It wasn't called SelfOS. It was called Install SelfOS, and I wasn't planning on sharing it. In fact, I deleted all of those original episodes, every single one, like they never happened, because they were just mine. Something I was doing for me, to think out loud, to put the stuff in front of me where I could actually listen to it. And then at some point I started over, different name, different format, and I started sharing it. And here's the part I haven't said out loud yet. I checked the analytics. I see the numbers. And those numbers don't mean anything to me. Not yet. I don't know who's listening. I don't know if it's landing. I don't know if the thing that came out of me, the reel, the journal, the first language, the race to nowhere, all of it. I don't know if any of it found the person it was supposed to find. And I keep going anyway. Not because I'm confident. Not because the numbers look good. Not because I have some vision of where this is headed and I'm executing toward it. Because making this show is the thing. Not the outcome of making it. The act of it. Sitting down and talking honestly into a microphone with no one in the room. Saying the uncomfortable true thing. Leaving it out there. And not knowing what happens to it after. And that, I didn't plan for this episode to start here, but here we are. That's vulnerability. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, where you make something real and you put it out and you don't get confirmation that it matters and you make the next one anyway. And I've been thinking about why that's so hard. Why not knowing feels so much worse than bad news. Why the silence of the analytics is somehow more uncomfortable than someone telling me it doesn't work. And I think it's because when the feedback loop is empty, when nothing comes back in, you start becoming the only voice in the room. And that voice, the one that's been running your background program your whole life, it doesn't always tell you the truth. That's what this episode is. Vulnerability. What it actually is. Why it's terrifying. And why, and this is the part I've been working out in my own head, it might be the only thing that actually opens the system. And once the system opens, once something real gets out and something real gets in, nothing runs the same way again.
Before anything else, just notice what you're carrying right now. Not out there, in here. The version of you that hasn't gotten out yet. The thing you almost said, almost posted, almost showed someone. That's not weakness. That's the window. And if you want something that helps you stay with what's actually there, there's a guide and reflection designed by SelfOS. It's called Pause Before You React. It walks you through the gap between the real version and the one you're showing. Use it when the voice gets loud. Alright. Let's get into this. There's a version of you that hasn't gotten out yet. Not because it doesn't exist, because the window has been closed. This episode is about what happens when you open it. Just a crack. Just enough. SelfOS Episode 15. You trust strangers more than yourself.
So let's talk about vulnerability. And before you check out, before you go, oh great, another podcast telling me to be vulnerable and open up and share my feelings and connect with my authentic self. Just give me a second, because I'm not going to do that. I promise. I've heard that podcast. It's not this one. What I want to talk about is the real version, the one nobody actually explains honestly. The one that isn't a TED Talk and isn't a therapy session and isn't some guy on a stage with perfect lighting telling you that the magic happens outside your comfort zone. The real version is ugly and awkward. And most of the time it doesn't feel like growth. It feels like you just said something you can't take back and now you're standing there wondering why you opened your mouth. That's vulnerability. That's the actual thing. And here's what I find fascinating about it. Everybody talks about it like it's a choice. Like you just decide to be vulnerable. Like you wake up one morning and go, you know what? Today I'm going to open up. And then they don't. And they call it fear. And it is fear. I'm not arguing that. But I think there's something underneath the fear that doesn't get talked about. Something that makes the fear make sense. Here's what it is. When you're closed, when you're running your own program, when the only voice in the room is the one in your head, you know what you're dealing with. It's familiar. It's yours. Even when it's not kind, even when it's not accurate, even when it's running a story about you that has nothing to do with who you actually are, at least it's predictable. But when you open a window, when you say the real thing, post the real thing, show up as the real thing, something comes in from outside, and you don't control that. You don't know what it is before it arrives. You don't know if it confirms your worst fears or surprises you in a way you weren't ready for. You don't know if the thing you put out there lands the way you meant it or gets interpreted in a way that makes you wish you'd kept the window closed. And that uncertainty, that specific terror of not knowing what comes back, is the thing that keeps most people sealed. Not because they're weak, because the closed system is efficient. It knows what it knows. It runs what it runs. And nothing from outside gets in to mess with the program. Let me get specific here, because I think it's the only way that it's going to actually land. The TikTok you haven't posted, you made it. Maybe you even recorded it. And then you watched it back and the closed system started going, who do you think you are? What if nobody watches? What if everybody watches and they think it's stupid? What if the thing you said sounds different out loud than it did in your head? So you go ahead and you put the phone down. You called it not ready yet. But what you actually did was decide that strangers, whose opinions you don't even know yet, were more qualified to judge the real version of you than you are. The thing you haven't said in the marriage. You know the one. The thing that's been sitting there. The one that's been almost coming out. You've rehearsed it in your head 100 times, and every time you get close. But the closed system goes, what if it changes things? What if they respond wrong? What if saying the real thing makes everything more complicated than it already is? And you say something else instead. Something adjacent, something safe. And the real thing sits there. It sits there and it gets heavier. It's more loaded. And the longer it waits, the harder it gets. Now let's do the version of you that never shows up at work. The real one. The one with the actual opinion, the actual idea, the actual reaction to what just happened in that meeting. That version sits in the back of the room and watches the performed version nod and agree and keep it professional. The closed system says, this is safer. This is smarter. You don't know how that would land. Keep the window closed. And here's what all three of those have in common. In Every single case, the TikTok, the marriage, the office. You decided that the version of you that hasn't been tested yet was less trustworthy than the fear of what strangers might think of it. You trusted the closed system's prediction over your own reality every time. Now, here's where I want you to push on something, because I think that people treat vulnerability like it's binary, like you're either vulnerable or you're not, like you either post the TikTok or you don't, either say the thing in the marriage or you don't, either show up as yourself at work or you perform. All or nothing, window open or window closed. And that's not how it works. At least it's not how it worked for me, because I didn't make a decision one day to be vulnerable. I made a podcast for myself, deleted the originals, started over, started sharing it. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, I was saying things into a microphone I'd never said out loud before. The reel, the anger, the journal, the race to nowhere, the second job, the hum, all of it came out. Not because I decided to be vulnerable, because I took one small step and survived and took another one. That's the practice, not the leap, the practice. You do it a little, you survive. You do it a little more, you survive that too. And over time, the window gets a little bigger. Not because you became brave, because you accumulated evidence that the thing you were afraid of, the response coming back, wasn't as catastrophic as the closed system predicted. And here's what I want you to hear from that. The closed system tells you it's all or nothing, that if you're going to open the window, you have to open it all the way. That partial vulnerability is somehow dishonest or incomplete. That if you're not ready to say something, you should say nothing. That voice is lying to you. The window doesn't have to open all the way for something real to get through. It just has to open a crack, a little, just enough. That's it. That's the whole practice. One crack at a time. The track coming up is going to hold you in that moment. The one right before the crack. The held breath. The thing almost said. Don't try to push through it in the track. Don't try to be braver than you are right now. Just feel what actually feels like to be at the edge. That's enough. For right now, that's more than enough.
There's a version of you that hasn't gotten out yet. Not because it doesn't exist, because the window has been closed for a very long time. So long that the closed system started to feel like the whole room. And if you've lived there long enough, you stop calling it a window. You call it reality. You call it who you are. You call it the way things have always been.
Think about the thing,
You almost said,
the message,
you almost sent,
the truth that reached your throat and stopped there.
the part of you that stepped forward just far enough to be seen.
And then heard that familiar voice.
Not yet,
Not now.
not safe.
And you listened.
You stepped back. You called it timing. You called it caution. You called it not ready. And the real thing stayed inside.
Here's what the closed system
Never never tells you.
The thing it has been protecting
The real version of you,
is not as fragile.
as fear makes it seem.
It does not shatter.
When the window opens,
It does not disappear.
when fresh air enters,
It does not break.
it simply gets out.
And something changes.
Not dramatically, not all at once,
Just enough.
for the room to feel larger than it did before.
Because now
There is more than one voice inside it.
you do not have to.
Open the window,
All the way.
just a crack,
Just enough
for something real,
to move through.
something real,
Getting out.
something real.
Getting in.
That is all it takes.
That is the whole thing.
The version of you,
The system has been protecting.
it was never weak
You just could not know that.
until something real,
Passed through the opening.
and you survived.
And the system updated.
Just a little.
Just enough.
The window,
Is already open.
it opened.
The moment.
You pressed play.
Something real.
Is getting in.
Right now.
And something real.
Is getting out.
Notice that.
Okay. Take a breath. Whatever came up in that track, whatever almost got out, whatever the voice said, whether the window opened a crack or stayed closed, just let it be there. Don't judge it. Don't turn it into a task. Just let it be there. Because I want to bring in two people right now. And I'm going to warn you up front. They have absolutely no business being in the same sentence together. One, a Roman emperor who ran an empire 2,000 years ago. And the other, a British philosopher who spent most of his life sitting by the ocean thinking about consciousness. And somehow between the two of them, they figured out the same thing from completely opposite directions. And that thing, that specific thing they both landed on, is the most psychologically freeing idea I've ever encountered. So, Marcus Aurelius, we've talked about him before. The journal, the guy who ran an empire and wrote his private thoughts down every day and accidentally created one of the most important books in human history. Yeah, him. And I want to use a line from him that you've probably never seen because it doesn't fit on a motivational poster and it doesn't make you feel good when you read it. It just makes you go quiet. He wrote, "I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinions of others." Yeah, let that sit for a second. You love yourself more than anyone else in the world, and you trust yourself less than any stranger whose opinion might come back through the window, right? That's the vulnerability paradox. That's the title of this episode in one sentence from a man who died in 180 AD. You sealed the window to protect the most important thing in your universe. And then you decided the most important thing in your universe was only worth what strangers said it was worth. You didn't post to TikTok because you were worried about people you've never met. You didn't say the real thing in the marriage because you were afraid of the response. You didn't show up as yourself at work because the closed system's prediction about what might come back was more authoritative than your own lived experience of who you actually are. That's not protection. That's the cruelest trick the closed system ever pulled. It convinced you that your own opinion of yourself was the least reliable data in the room. And here's what Aurelius was actually pointing at with that line. He wasn't criticizing vulnerability. He was noticing the absurdity of the closed system. The system that says, I am the most important thing. I will protect myself at all costs. I will seal the window. I will run my own signal. And then immediately hands the judgment of itself to outside opinion. The system seals itself from real connection and then makes its own worth dependent on the connection it sealed itself from. That's the loop. And once you see it, once you actually feel how absurd that loop is, something loosens. Not because you fixed anything, because the system's logic stopped making sense. Now, Alan Watts. If Marcus Aurelius is the disciplined Roman emperor sitting in his tent writing about the inner life, Alan Watts is the guy who looked at the whole thing and laughed. Not dismissively, joyfully. Like someone who finally saw the joke the universe had been setting up for thousands of years and couldn't help himself. And the joke, the thing Watts kept circling around from every direction, is this. The self you're protecting doesn't exist the way you think it does. Now, before you check out, before you go, okay, this is getting too philosophical, stay with me. Because this is actually the most freeing idea I've ever encountered. And I want to say this in plain English. The version of yourself you're hiding when you don't post a TikTok, when you don't say the real thing, when you perform fine instead of showing up as yourself, that version you're protecting is not as solid as it feels. It's not a fixed thing. It's more like a pattern, a program running, a signal generating. And the closed system treats this pattern like it's made of glass. Like one real moment, one honest thing said out loud will shatter it. It won't. Watts used to say that trying to protect yourself from yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. You can't get outside of yourself to protect yourself from yourself. The self you're trying to protect is the same self that fears being exposed. There's no separation. There's no fixed self behind the performance that can be damaged by the performance dropping. It's all the same thing. And when you really feel that, when it stops being a concept and starts being something you actually experience, something relaxes. Not in a way that suddenly makes everything easy, but something in the closed system goes, oh, wait, I've been protecting something that didn't need protecting. I've been keeping the window sealed to protect something that doesn't break. That's the psychological freedom, not the absence of fear, the realization that what you're afraid of losing was never as fragile as the closed system told you it was. So here's what Marcus Aurelius and Alan Watts are both pointing at from their completely different directions. Marcus, from the inside, you have the opinion that matters most. You love yourself more than anyone. Start acting like it. The closed system story about what strangers think is borrowing authority it was never given. Watts, from the outside, the thing you're protecting isn't what you think it is. And once you see that, once you really see it, the protection stops making sense. Not because you became brave, because the threat was never what the closed system said it was. And here's what that means for the TikTok, for the thing you haven't said in the marriage, for the real version of you that keeps not showing up at work. You're not protecting yourself by keeping the window closed. You're just keeping yourself in a room with one voice, your own, running the same signal, generating the same story, with no new information getting in and no real version of you getting out. And I want to say something about what actually happens when the window opens, because I think people expect a dramatic shift. Like the moment you post a TikTok or say the real thing, something cinematic happens. The music swells, people respond, you feel seen and known and free. But usually it's quieter than that. Usually it just feels like, oh, I said the thing and I survived. And the closed system's prediction was wrong. Again. And you file that small, undramatic survival, and you do it again. And you file that too. And over time, slowly, imperfectly, with plenty of times you keep the window closed anyway, the system updates. Not because you became a different person, because you accumulated enough evidence that the real version of you, the one the closed system has been protecting, was never in as much danger as it thought. The window doesn't have to be open all the way. It just has to be open. And what comes through in both directions is the only thing that was ever real. Something real getting out, something real getting in. That exchange is what the closed system was designed to prevent. And it's the only thing that actually changes anything. So, here's what I want to leave you with. And I'm going to say it simply because I think simple is right for this one. I made this show for myself. Deleted the originals. Started over. And somewhere in the process of making it, somewhere between install SelfOS and right now, this episode, this moment, the window opened. Not because I decided to be vulnerable, because I kept going, one episode at a time, one honest thing said into a microphone with no one in the room, one crack at a time. And I still check the analytics, and the numbers still don't mean anything to me yet. And the voice still shows up sometimes asking, is anyone actually out there? Does this actually matter? And when nothing comes back, I start becoming the only voice in the room again. And that voice isn't always kind. But here's what I know. The window is open. Something real is getting out. And if even one person, one actual person sitting somewhere right now who has been running their closed system alone, who has been the only voice in their own room, who has the hum but doesn't know what to do with it, if even one person hears something in this show that makes the room feel slightly less sealed, that's everything. That's the whole reason the window exists. You trust strangers more than yourself. I know, because I do it too. We all do it. The closed system runs in all of us, generating the same signal, predicting the same catastrophe. Keeping the window sealed to protect something that was never as fragile as the fear made it feel. Open it anyway, not all the way. Not today if you're not ready. Just a crack, just enough. One small, honest thing, one real moment, one version of you that gets out of the room and into the world. Marcus Aurelius loved himself more than anyone, and he still kept the journal, still put the real thing on paper where it could be looked at. Watts understood the self was a pattern, not a fixed object. And he still sat by the ocean and said the truth thing out loud until people stopped what they were doing to listen. Neither of them waited until they were sure it would land. They just opened the window and trusted that what came through was more vulnerable than what they were protecting. Do that. That's it. That's the whole episode. That's the whole show. The window is open. Walk through it.
The window is open. Something real got out. Something real got in. The closed system is a little less closed than it was an hour ago. That's not nothing. That's everything. You trust strangers more than yourself. Not anymore. Not as much. Not after this. The room is more than one voice in it now. Notice how different that feels. SelfOS, episode 15.
This was a production of SelfOS. Awareness is power.